The old books of the Concordium spoke of humans as myths. They were just stories told to children, tales of beings who had mastered space travel before vanishing without a trace. Stories to entertain, not history to be studied. Researcher just sat alone in his dimly lit lab, staring at the artifact. The metal cylinder fit perfectly in his four-fingered hand. Its surface was marked with symbols unlike any known language in the Concordium's records. Unlike his fellow researchers, he couldn't ignore what he had found. Elder Doan will deny it again, he muttered, scanning the clearly human-made device. The lab hummed quietly around him. Screens showed test results that went against everything the Council taught about space history. The metal was made of elements mixed in ways no known species had ever created. The power source, though inactive, gave off energy that matched no known technology. Ju's skin, normally a calm blue, had darkened with frustration. For 3 years, he had brought proof to the elders. For 3 years, they had dismissed his findings as mistakes or wishful thinking. Humans are bedtime stories, Researcher Ju, Elder Doan had said last time, her voice gentle but firm. Next you'll claim the Star Eaters are real as well. The lab door slid open with a soft hiss. His assistant Me entered, walking quickly and breathing fast. Her eye covers blinked rapidly, a sign of worry among their kind. Another signal detected at the edge of our space, she said, placing a data crystal on his desk. The Council is concerned. Ju put the crystal into his computer. The display showed a section of space near the abandoned Sector 7. Energy readings pulsed across the screen, organized, patterned, clearly artificial. This is the third signal this month, he said, making the display clearer, each one closer than the last. Me leaned closer. The Council believes it may be the Doran Collective testing new communication technology. The Durans. Ju laughed without humor. Their ships can barely reach their own colony worlds. These signals are coming from deep space. He adjusted the display, laying the new readings over data from his artifact. The patterns matched perfectly. They should be concerned, Ju replied, not looking up. The legends are returning. Me's skin paled. You can't truly believe. I've studied every text, every piece of evidence for 20 years. Ju interrupted. The so-called myths speak of a species that built wonders beyond our understanding, who fought wars that shook galaxies, who vanished when they were most powerful. He lifted the artifact. This device is real. The signals are real. What if the humans are real too? A notification chimed on Me's personal communicator. She checked it, her expression changing to alarm. The Science Council requests your immediate presence, she said. Elder Doan specifically asked for you. Ju carefully placed the artifact in a secure container. Perhaps they're finally ready to listen. The hallways of the Central Science Facility were unusually busy. Researchers hurried between departments, speaking in hushed tones. Something had changed in the usually calm atmosphere. When they reached the council chamber, Ju was surprised to see not just the Science Council but military leaders as well. Elder Doan sat at the center, her usually composed face tense. Researcher Ju, she said when he entered. Show us your findings again. Confused but hopeful, Ju connected his data crystal to the main display. The room darkened as images of his artifact appeared alongside analysis of the recent signals. For years I've argued that humans weren't myths, he began. New information has come to light. Elder Doan interrupted. 20 minutes ago, our long-range sensors detected something entering our space. She nodded to a military officer who activated a separate display. The image showed darkness at first, then tiny points of light, hundreds of them, moving in formation. Ships, Ju whispered. An entire fleet, the officer confirmed, of unknown design and origin. Elder Doan turned to Ju, her expression grave. The signals were attempts at communication. They've sent a message in an ancient language. Our systems took time to translate it. The final display showed simple text. We are the United Earth Federation. Humanity has returned. Prepare for contact. Ju looked from the message to his artifact, then back to the council. The legends are real, he said softly. And they've come home. Admiral Kungo stood motionless on the command deck of the Concordium Defense Station Alpha. His four eyes were fixed on the main view screen. His outer hands were clasped behind his back, while his primary hands rested on the command console. Around him, the crew worked in tense silence. "Another 12 vessels have appeared, Admiral," reported the sensor officer. "That brings the total to 537. The unknown fleet had appeared near Outpost 7 3 hours ago. At first just a few vessels, then dozens, now hundreds, perhaps thousands. They maintained perfect formation, neither advancing nor retreating." Kungo had lived through 3 border conflicts and 1 full-scale war in his 60 years of service. Never had he seen such discipline in a fleet. Never had he felt such unease. "Magnify Section 4, he ordered. The screen shifted to show one of the larger vessels. Its design was unlike anything in Concordium records, sleek and angular, with strange parts that might be weapons or sensors. No obvious engine exhausts were visible, yet the ships had appeared with impossible speed. "Are they matching any known configurations?" Kungo asked. Strategic Officer Bina checked her screen. "No matches in our database, Admiral. However," she hesitated. "Speak freely, officer. The design elements bear striking similarities to the artifacts researcher Ju has been studying. The ones he claims are of human origin." A murmur spread across the command deck. The mention of humans, creatures of legend, brought both fear and disbelief. "Send the greeting protocols," Kungo ordered, his voice hiding his inner worry. Lieutenant Yunji, the communications officer, started the standard first contact sequence, a series of math equations and simple pictures designed to establish basic understanding across language barriers. The Concordium had used these protocols only twice in the last century, both times with primitive species, just beginning space travel. Minutes passed. The unknown fleet remained silent. No response. Lieutenant Yunji reported, her voice steady despite her fear. The skin around her neck had turned a light blue, a biological response to stress their species couldn't control. "Repeat on all frequencies," Kungo ordered. "Add the emergency diplomatic codes." As Yunji worked, Kungo opened a secure channel to Concordium Central Command. "The situation remains unchanged," he reported. "We are attempting communication, but—" "Admiral," Yunji interrupted, something she would never do under normal circumstances. "We're receiving a transmission." The command center fell silent as the main screen flickered. The image of the alien fleet vanished, replaced by a face. The being had 2 eyes, not 4, skin without scales, hair on the top of its head, a mouth with flat teeth. It was unmistakably what ancient texts described as human. "This is Fleet Commander Han of the United Earth Federation. After 5 centuries, humanity has returned to known space." The voice was translated by the ship's computers, but even translated, it carried authority and absolute confidence. Kungo found himself momentarily unable to speak. In his youth, he had read the forbidden stories of humanity, tales of a species that had once ruled the stars before vanishing, stories the Council insisted were myths. "This is Admiral Kungo of the Concordium Defense Force," he finally responded. "Your presence has caused considerable concern. Our records contain no verified information about your species." Commander Han's expression remained neutral. "That is unsurprising, Admiral. We withdrew from this region of space long before your civilization achieved starflight." "For what purpose have you returned?" Kungo asked, aware that every word of this exchange was being transmitted to Central Command. "We monitored your development from afar. Your civilization has grown impressively." Han paused. "But you are not prepared for what approaches. We have returned to help you survive it." Before Kungo could ask what this meant, another officer rushed onto the command deck. "Admiral, urgent news from the outer systems," she said, extending a data pad. "Outpost 12 has gone silent. Last transmission reported unknown biological entities unlike anything we've encountered." As Kungo read the report, Commander Han spoke again. "I see you've received word of the first incursion. We were too late to save that outpost. We need not be too late for the rest of your worlds." Kungo looked up at the human's face on the screen, understanding dawning. "You didn't come back for us." No, Han agreed. We came back because of what follows us. And now it follows you too. The Grand Council Chamber of the Concordium had never hosted beings like these before. 3 humans sat across from the 7 council members. Their forms were strange, yet eerily familiar. They had 2 arms instead of 4, their skin smooth instead of scaled, and they walked differently. Yet their eyes held intelligence that matched any counselor's gaze. The chamber itself, a marvel of Concordium architecture with its soaring crystal ceiling and living light formations, seemed less impressive with these visitors present. The humans appeared unimpressed, as if they had seen greater wonders. Behind the counselors stood various experts and assistants, including researcher Ju and his assistant Me. After years of being mocked for his theories about human existence, Ju could barely contain his excitement. Me noticed his skin had turned an almost glowing shade of blue, a sign of intense emotion among their kind. "You abandoned your worlds," said Counselor Chino, staring at the human delegation. His voice carried accusation, though he tried to hide it. "The historical sites we discovered on planets throughout our territory, they were yours, then discarded." The human at the center, Ambassador Jen, smiled patiently. Unlike her military companions who sat rigidly in their seats, she had a relaxed posture. Her gray-streaked hair was pulled back, revealing a face lined with age yet animated with intelligence. "We retreated to survive," she replied. "The catastrophe that struck our worlds was beyond our technology then." "What catastrophe could force an entire species to vanish?" asked Counselor Tayan. "Our scientists have found no evidence of natural disaster on these worlds." Ambassador Jen exchanged glances with her companions before answering. "It wasn't natural. We call them the Void Eaters. You will likely face them soon." A murmur ran through the chamber. The same threat Admiral Kungo had reported from the fleet encounter. "You speak of the same danger your military commander mentioned," Counselor Jima noted. "Yet you provide no proof. Why should we believe this isn't merely justification for your return, perhaps even a pretext for conquest?" Before Jen could answer, Me stepped forward from behind the council table. As a junior researcher, this breach of protocol was shocking. Ju tried to pull her back, but she avoided his grasp. "The monoliths of Sector 9, those were yours?" she asked, her voice clear despite her obvious nervousness. The humans all turned to look at her. Ambassador Jen's expression changed from diplomatic neutrality to genuine interest. "Yes," Jen confirmed. "What you call ancient wonders, we call our history. We've been watching from the shadows, waiting until we were needed again." Me pulled out a small device and projected an image between them, a massive black structure rising from the surface of a distant world. "The monolith of Takaru, the most famous of the unexplained ancient structures," Me explained. "I studied these for years. They're not monuments, they're functional. They emit pulses of unknown energy every 73 days, precisely." The human military officer to Jen's left leaned forward. "The Deep Watch Network. It's still operational after all this time." He sounded surprised. "It's a sensor array," Ambassador Jen explained, "designed to detect void movement across vast distances. If your scientists have recorded increased pulse activity recently, that confirms our worst fears." Counselor Chuno looked at me. "Is this true?" Me nodded. "The pulses increased in frequency 3 months ago. Now they occur every 2 days." Ju stepped forward to stand beside his assistant. "We assumed it was a malfunction in our monitoring equipment. We were wrong." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The evidence supporting the humans' claims was coming from the Concordium's own research. Ambassador Jen stood, her full height slightly less than the Concordium members, but her presence somehow filling the room. 5 centuries ago, we faced extinction. We weren't ready. We retreated to the far side of the galaxy, rebuilding, preparing. We left behind warnings and watchers. She gestured to the image of the monolith. When these began signaling, we knew it was time to return, not for conquest, for alliance. "Why should we trust you?" asked Counselor Cho, though his tone had softened. "Because the alternative is facing the void alone," Jen replied simply. "And no species has ever survived that." From the back of the chamber, a new voice spoke. Admiral Kungo had entered quietly during the exchange. Outposts 12 through 15 have gone silent, he announced. The last transmissions match exactly what the humans described. The Void Eaters have arrived at our borders. Ambassador Jen nodded grimly. Then we have much less time than I hoped. The lost children of Earth have returned, counselors. The question is, will you accept our help? Commander Han stood in the center of the Concordium war room, his uniform crisp despite the 20 hours he had been awake. Around him, the highest military and political leaders of the Concordium gathered, their scaled skin reflecting the blue glow of the holographic display. They call themselves the Void, Commander Han explained, showing holographic images of massive bioships. They consume everything in their path. The images rotated slowly above the central table. The Void vessels resembled nothing built by humans or the Concordium. They were organic, with pulsing veins running across dark, rough surfaces. Some stretched kilometers in length, with tentacles extending outward like hungry fingers reaching for prey. "These ships are alive?" asked Admiral Kungo, leaning forward to study the images. "Ship, pilot, and weapon, all one organism," Han confirmed. "They don't build their technology, they grow it. They don't fuel their vessels, they feed them." Chancellor Tayan shook his head. "These could be fabrications, computer simulations to frighten us into accepting your presence." His four eyes narrowed, inner eyelids blinking rapidly, a sign of suspicion among his kind. Han's expression remained unchanged, but Ambassador Jen, standing quietly at his side, stepped forward. "Chancellor, we understand your caution," she said, "but consider what you've already confirmed. The increased activity from the monoliths, the loss of contact with your outposts." "Coincidences," said Tayan, "or perhaps even your doing." From the back of the room, researcher Ju moved closer to the table. Since the human's arrival, he had become an unofficial liaison between the species, his years of study making him uniquely qualified. "The outpost in the Moran system was destroyed yesterday," Ju interjected. "I've analyzed the final transmissions. The patterns match Commander Han's warning exactly." He connected his data pad to the main display. The holographic images changed to show the final moments recorded from the outpost. Fuzzy images showed dark shapes approaching the station, then strange organic tentacles punching through hull plating. The station's external cameras captured glimpses of creatures moving through the corridors, tall, skeletal forms with too many limbs, their bodies seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. "The last transmission included this," Ju said quietly. Audio filled the room, screams, strange clicking sounds, and a final message. "They're inside. They're eating everything. The station, the people, even the light itself." Silence fell across the chamber as the reality sank in. The humans hadn't returned by chance. Commander Han waited a moment before continuing. "We first encountered the Void 600 years ago. They destroyed our colonies one by one. Earth itself was nearly lost." He gestured, and the hologram changed to show images of ancient battles. Human ships, primitive compared to their current fleet, facing the organic horror of the Void. "We retreated, regrouped in distant sectors. We rebuilt our civilization, advanced our technology, and prepared for their inevitable return," Han continued. "The monoliths you discovered were our early warning system. When they began signaling more frequently, we knew the Void had found this sector again." Admiral Kungo studied the battle footage. "You defeated them before?" "Not defeated," Han corrected. "Survived. There's a difference." Ambassador Jen added, "We've learned much since then. But the Void evolves. Each encounter, they adapt to our weapons, our tactics." Me, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, suddenly looked up. "Commander, these biological readings from the Void entities, they're responding to something." All eyes turned to her as she projected her findings onto the main display. Intricate graphs showed energy patterns emanating from the Void ships, patterns that shifted and pulsed in distinct rhythms. "These organisms don't just consume," she continued, her voice growing more confident. "They communicate. These patterns here," she highlighted a section of the data, "changed when they encountered our defensive systems. But they also changed when they detected your human ships. Commander Han moved closer to examine her findings. You're saying they recognize us? I'm saying they remember you, Mi replied. These patterns show clear recognition signatures. They're not just hunting randomly. They're hunting you specifically. A heavy silence fell over the room. Ambassador Jen and Commander Han exchanged troubled glances. That's impossible, said Chancellor Tayan. How could biological entities maintain such specific memories over centuries? The void isn't just biological, Han finally admitted. There's something else entirely. We've suspected this for some time, but your researchers' data confirms it. Admiral Kungo's outer hands tightened into fists. What are you telling us? Ambassador Jen stepped forward. The void doesn't just consume matter and energy. They consume information, knowledge, memory. She nodded to me. Your discovery proves what we've long feared. They haven't just been hunting us. They've been studying us. And now they're studying you, Commander Han added grimly. Learning your weaknesses, your patterns, your technology. Ju, who had been analyzing the data alongside me, suddenly understood. The artifact I found years ago, it wasn't just a human relic. It was a warning, wasn't it? Ambassador Jen nodded. A warning and a key. It contains critical information about the void's weaknesses. Information we couldn't risk falling into their hands. Which is why you left it here, Ju concluded. In a place they wouldn't think to look. Precisely, Jen confirmed. We scattered similar artifacts throughout the galaxy, each containing a piece of what we know about them. Commander Han activated a new display, showing strategic positions across Concordium space. We need to integrate our fleets immediately. Our vessels carry weapons specifically designed to combat the void, but we'll need your space stations, your infrastructure. Admiral Kungo studied the proposed deployments. This would give your forces access to our most sensitive defense systems. Yes, Han didn't deny it, and it would give you access to technology centuries beyond your own. The choice is simple: trust us, or face extinction. Chancellor Tayan's inner eyelids flickered rapidly. This council cannot make such a momentous decision without proper deliberation. Chancellor, Admiral Kungo interrupted. The void has already destroyed 4 outposts. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach the Vega system within days. Vega has 3 billion inhabitants, Counselor Cho whispered. Commander Han's expression remained impassive, but his eyes revealed the weight of experience. We've seen what happens when the void reaches populated worlds. 500 years ago, we lost Earth's colony on Proxima Centauri. 9 million lives in less than 6 hours. The room fell silent. The magnitude of the threat was becoming clear. If we share our defenses, asked Counselor Jima, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't simply conquer us after the void is repelled? Ambassador Jen smiled sadly. None. Just as we have no guarantee that you wouldn't turn against us if the opportunity arose. But the void doesn't leave room for such luxuries as perfect trust. Me, still analyzing the data, spoke up again. There's something else. The void ships aren't just coming toward us. They're spreading out, encircling our territory. Standard encirclement tactics, Han confirmed. They're preparing to cut off escape routes. Not just that, Mi continued. They're targeting specific systems first. She highlighted several points on the stellar map. These systems all contain monoliths. They're targeting our warning system, Jen realized, cutting off our ability to track them. Admiral Kungo made his decision. We don't have time for council deliberations. As Supreme Commander of the Concordium Defense Force, I am invoking Emergency Protocol 17. Chancellor Tayan's scales darkened with anger. You overstep your authority, Admiral. I am exercising my authority to protect the Concordium from imminent extinction, Kungo replied calmly. Commander Han, you have the full cooperation of the Concordium Defense Force. Han nodded. We'll begin integration immediately. My fleet commanders are already en route to your key defense stations. What about the artifact? Ju asked. If it contains information about the void's weaknesses. Bring it here, Han ordered. Our scientists will work with yours to unlock its secrets. As the meeting dispersed into urgent action, Mi approached Ju. After all these years, you were right, she said quietly. The humans were real. Ju's skin had returned to its normal blue. I'm not sure that's a comfort anymore. 3 days later, the joined human Concordium fleet stood ready in orbit around Vega Prime. 87 human warships formed the core of the defensive formation, their sleek designs making the Concordium vessels look bulky and primitive by comparison. But the Concordium had contributed over 300 ships to the effort, creating the largest combined fleet in known space. On the bridge of the UEF flagship Defiance, Commander Han stood beside Admiral Kungo, watching the tactical display. The Void fleet approached in a crescent formation, their bioships moving with eerie coordination. They'll be in weapons range in 17 minutes, reported the tactical officer, a young human whose hands moved across his console with practiced efficiency. Han turned to Kungo. Have all civilian ships evacuated? All but the largest colony ships, Kungo replied. They're still loading. We need another hour. Han's expression hardened. They won't have an hour. He turned to his communications officer. Signal all ships. Execute Phase 1. Throughout the fleet, human and Concordium vessels alike activated their primary weapon systems. Human ships deployed what they call Void Lances, weapons designed to disrupt the biological processes of the enemy ships. Concordium vessels powered up their traditional energy weapons, modified with human technology to better penetrate the Void's organic armor. First wave approaching, announced the tactical officer. Han nodded to Kungo. They're testing our defenses, probing for weaknesses. Just like a predator, Kungo agreed. Hunting. The first wave of Void ships accelerated, their dark forms silhouetted against the star field. They moved with a fluid grace that belied their massive size, tentacles extending forward like hungry fingers. All ships, fire at will, Han ordered. The combined fleet unleashed its firepower. Beams of energy lashed out across space, striking the approaching Void ships. Where the Void lances hit, the organic hulls blackened and withered. The Concordium's energy weapons caused the ships to convulse and twist. But the Void ships continued their advance, absorbing damage that would have destroyed conventional vessels. From their hulls erupted smaller biological forms, fighter-sized organisms, that swarmed toward the defending fleet. Secondary defensive positions, Han commanded. Intercept those swarms. The battle joined in earnest, space itself seeming to warp with the intensity of the conflict. Void organisms latched onto Concordium ships, dissolving their hulls with acidic secretions. Human vessels executed complex maneuvers, their more advanced technology allowing them to target the Void's vulnerable areas. On the Defiance, Han watched the tactical display with growing concern. They're adapting too quickly, he muttered. The Void lances aren't as effective as they should be. A communication channel opened. Ju's face appeared on the main screen. Commander, we've made a breakthrough with the artifact. It's transmitting on a frequency that disrupts the Void's coordination. Han's eyes widened. Can you amplify it? We're trying, Ju replied, but we need more power. Han turned to Kungo. Admiral, we need to reconfigure your fleet's communication arrays to boost this signal. Kungo didn't hesitate, sending the command now. Throughout the fleet, Concordium vessels diverted power to their communication systems, broadcasting the strange frequency discovered in the human artifact. The effect was immediate. The smaller Void organisms began moving erratically, their coordination breaking down. It's working, Ju exclaimed. The artifact is disrupting their hive mind. All ships, concentrate fire on the larger vessels, Han ordered. Target their central nervous clusters. The combined fleet focused its firepower on the primary Void ships. Without the coordination of their smaller fighters, the massive bioships became more vulnerable. Human Void lances carved deep wounds in their organic hulls, while Concordium energy weapons targeted the exposed weaknesses. For a moment, it seemed the tide was turning. Then, suddenly, the Void ships changed tactics. They began emitting a counter-frequency, jamming the signal from the artifact. They're adapting. Ju warned. The signal is being blocked. On the tactical display, the Void Fleet shifted formation, their movements becoming more coordinated once again. Several broke through the defensive line, heading directly for the civilian evacuation ships. Divert second squadron to protect the civilians, Han ordered. Commander, the tactical officer called out. A new Void ship has entered the system. It's massive. The main view screen showed a Void vessel unlike any they had encountered before. Nearly 10 kilometers long, it resembled a vast, skeletal hand reaching out across space. Its surface pulsed with dark energy, and it moved with impossible speed for its size. The Void Matriarch, Han whispered. They've sent their command ship. Admiral Kungo stared at the monstrous entity. Can we defeat it? Not with conventional weapons, Han admitted, but we prepared for this. He opened a channel to Ambassador Jen, who had remained on the Concordium Central Command Station. It's time, Ambassador. Activate Protocol Omega. Jen's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. Understood, Commander. May the stars watch over you. Han turned to Kungo. Admiral, I need you to order all Concordium ships to fall back to the secondary defensive position. Right now. Retreat? But the civilians will be saved. Han interrupted. But only if you trust me. Pull your ships back now. Kungo hesitated, then nodded. All Concordium vessels, fall back to secondary positions. Immediate execution. As the Concordium fleet withdrew, the human ships moved into a new formation. They arranged themselves in a perfect circle, surrounding the approaching Void Matriarch. What are they doing? Kungo asked. On the bridge of the Defiance, Han addressed his crew. All hands, prepare for Luminous Protocol. This is not a drill. Throughout the human fleet, crews activated systems that had remained dormant until now. Each ship began emitting a distinctive energy signature, forming a complex pattern between them. What is this? Kungo demanded. Something we developed over 5 centuries, Han replied. A weapon of last resort. The human ships began to glow with an inner light that intensified with each passing second. The Void Matriarch sensed the danger and accelerated, its massive form surging toward them. All ships, synchronize, Han ordered. On my command now. The human vessels released their energy simultaneously. Instead of firing outward, the energy formed connections between the ships, creating a vast, glowing web that ensnared the Void Matriarch. Where the energy touched the massive bioship, its organic structure began to dissolve, not from damage but from something more fundamental. The Void consumes, Han explained to Kungo, but it can also be consumed. We're not destroying it with energy. You're unmaking it, Kungo realized. At the quantum level. The Void Matriarch thrashed within the energy web, its enormous form beginning to dissolve from within. As it died, the smaller Void ships became disoriented, their movements chaotic and uncoordinated. All ships re-engage, Han ordered. Target the remaining Void vessels. The combined fleet pressed its advantage, methodically destroying the now vulnerable Void ships. Without their matriarch, they lacked the coordination that made them so deadly. Hours later, when the last Void ship had been destroyed, Han stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking out at the stars. Admiral Kungo joined him. You knew this would happen, Kungo said. You knew they would send their matriarch. Han nodded. They always do eventually. It's why we needed your help. Our ships alone couldn't have held them off long enough to spring the trap. So this alliance, Kungo mused. It was genuine after all. Always was, Han replied. Humanity has learned some hard lessons, Admiral. The greatest being that no species survives alone. Kungo's outer hands clasped behind his back. The Void they'll return, won't they? Yes, Han admitted. Perhaps not in your lifetime, or even in mine, but they always return. And when they do, they'll remember. They'll adapt. And we'll be ready, Kungo concluded. Han turned to face the Admiral. Together we will be. 1 year later, Researcher Ju stood before the newly formed Concordium Human Scientific Council. The chamber was filled with the brightest minds from both species, gathered to share knowledge and prepare for the future. The monolith network has been fully reactivated, Ju reported. With human assistance, we've expanded it to cover twice the previous area of space. Ambassador Jen, now serving as the human representative to the council, nodded approvingly. And the artifacts? We've located 17 more, Ju replied, each containing unique information about the void and their weaknesses. My team is analyzing them now. Elder Doan, who had once dismissed Ju's theories about humans, now sat beside Ambassador Jen. The events of the past year had changed everything. The Concordium had accepted that their history was more complex than they had believed, that the stories of humans weren't myths after all. And what of the void technology we recovered? Asked Counselor Chino. Being studied with extreme caution, Mi replied. She had been promoted to lead researcher after her crucial role in the Vega battle. We've confirmed Commander Han's assessment. The void doesn't just consume physical matter. They absorb information, memories, knowledge. Which is why they recognized humans, Ju added, and why they'll recognize us next time. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The void would return, and when they did, they would come prepared for both humans and the Concordium. Then we must be ready, Elder Doan declared. The exchange program between our species must continue. We have much to learn from each other. Ambassador Jen nodded. Humanity spent 5 centuries preparing for the last encounter. We won't waste the time we have now. As the council continued its discussions, Ju found himself thinking about the small artifact that had started everything. A simple metal cylinder that had proven humans were real. Now, human ships regularly docked at Concordium stations. Human scientists worked alongside their Concordium counterparts. The legends had returned, and with them, a new chapter in the history of both species. Researcher Ju, Ambassador Jen called, interrupting his thoughts. Your work on the artifacts has been invaluable. Commander Han has requested that you join the expedition to the edge of known space. We believe the void may have left traces there that could help us understand their origins. Ju felt a mix of fear and excitement. I would be honored, Ambassador. As the meeting concluded, Ju found me waiting for him outside the chamber. So, you're going to the edge of space, she said, continuing your search for myths and legends. Ju smiled. Except now we know they're real. Mi's skin shifted to a warmer blue. The humans have a saying. Be careful what you wish for. They also say, knowledge is power, Ju replied, and we'll need all the power we can get when the void returns. Above them, through the transparent dome of the council building, they could see the stars. Somewhere out there, the void was regrouping, evolving, preparing. And somewhere else, human and Concordium ships flew together, exploring, learning, preparing. The legends had returned, and together, they would face whatever came next.